Good afternoon.
Yeah, hi, Bob. This is Merrill, the born-again conservative.
Yes, Merrill.
How are you? Oh, I'm not supposed to say that.
Now, let's see. Where did... You introduced yourself to me not too long ago.
Right, you were with...
In Stanley's... Wait a minute. I got it. Stanley's Diner.
Right.
Over there. I was with the great Robert Diamond and Richard Diamond.
Right.
Of the most prestigious law firm in the state of New Jersey.
Who are my attorneys as well.
Oh, really?
Yes. As a matter of fact, the reason I went to them in the first place is when I heard him on your show.
Well, good.
And he did very well for me. He's excellent. I highly recommend him.
By the way, if you're listening, Bob, how come you're not returning my phone calls? That goes for you, too, Richard. And Bill Diamond, the scion of the Diamond family, tell the boys I haven't heard back from them. Okay, now that that's taken care of, well,
okay.
What's on your mind, Merrill?
Okay, as a born-again conservative, the one issue I've never wavered on has been civil rights. But we seem to have developed an emperor has no clothes mentality when it comes towards blacks. And it's finally getting to me, and I feel it's on a couple of issues I just have to speak out. There are a couple of recent incidents that I'd like to talk about, and they may not seem related, but I think they are. One is the visit of Nelson Mandela, and the other is the riots in Detroit after the Pistons won the basketball championship.
Yes.
Okay. Let's put aside the fact that Mandela is, friends with Castro, Gaddafi, and Arafat, and praises their human rights records, let's put that aside for a second. To take a quote from a certain racist from Westchester named Eli, I think there's another subliminal message here in his visit. It seems to me that the reason he is so popular is that he represents to the black man the struggle against the white man. And I'm not just talking about South Africa. I'm talking about all over.
Yes, I think this is a good point. And by the way, I read just today, I had enough spare time to catch up on some reading. I read the famous speech made by Malcolm X back in the 1960s. And it is an incredible speech, one of the most riveting speeches, and one of the most frightening speeches you could possibly want to read. I don't know how many black Americans have ever read that. I know very few really got a chance to hear Malcolm X, who was a far better speaker than Martin Luther King was. But what Malcolm was saying was precisely what you say, except for one thing.
Okay.
Malcolm said, we must return to Africa, otherwise we will never find ourselves. Did you know he said that?
I seem to recall something to that effect. I didn't know.
Well, it might be interesting sometime to read excerpts of his speech on the program, because a lot of people should understand the depth of the feeling that blacks have. Then maybe they could put into perspective the situation that you correctly called the emperor has no clothes mentality. But I didn't mean to interrupt
That's
this,
all right.
this long. Go ahead, Merrill.
Okay, so what we have now is a new forum for the so-called black leadership, to continue with their blame everyone but themselves, for the lack of progress among blacks, which in effect is a lie, because during the 1980s, the group that advanced economically more than any other social group were the blacks. And what they keep pointing their finger at is really what we call, I would call the underclass. The people that are trapped in a world of crime, drugs, illiteracy, illegitimacy, and so on. And these are people that have refused to join the mainstream of society. Okay?
And there are whites also who are in that category, who are members of an underclass and will always be members of an underclass. I see them sometimes on trips I take to the Southwest, some small towns I go through. You see them. There is absolutely a vacant look, a vacuous expression. They have no hope. They have no ambition. And it doesn't make any difference that their skin is as white as the driven snow. The attitude is the same. I know what you mean.
Right. Yeah, and it's just basically antisocial behavior. And as long as we have a segment of our society that's not living by a social or moral laws that that America has traditionally been part of or exemplified, and at the same time that this behavior is condoned by the other segments of society, we're doomed. We got to fail. And this gets me back to what I wanted to mention about the riots in Detroit. Okay, this is after the championship, which was supposed to be a celebration. We had rioting, murders, looting, destruction from a segment of our society. And so what's the reaction? Well, hey, so what else is new? Everyone knows that they're oppressed, and we have to expect that behavior. But, I'm saying, no, we don't have to expect that behavior, and we shouldn't, and we should be more outspoken about it.
Well, that's true. There's something about winning a title that brings out the worst in some people. This happens whether it's the Pistons winning in Detroit or a soccer game where the United Kingdom, the Italian government had to send 246 Brits packing. They had to kick them out of the country because of their hooliganism. The word fan, remember, is short for fanatic.
Right.
And people who get all wrapped up in the outcome of a sporting event, I think, are mentally shortchanged, I think, and emotionally defective. Look, I root for a team, you root for a team, and there's something wholesome and healthy about it. But when they want to destroy things because they won a championship or destroy things because they lost a close one, then I think then we're involved in something that's pathological.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to say that I honestly believe if there's no emergence of a charismatic black man who really embraces the traditional values, and conservative values, of this country, I think we're, looking at a long and hard times ahead.
Well, they don't want to listen. The black community does not want to listen to a Thomas Sowell,
right,
and Alan Keyes, a Walter Williams. And these are three very articulate, very attractive gentlemen. But they have very little following in the total black community because they're not hitting the right keys.
Right.
And the keys that the community wants to hear are the keys that we are all too familiar with.
That's right.
I thank you. Thank you, Merrill.
Nice talking about it.
The Best of Bob Grant returns after these messages from WABC.
Yeah, hi, Bob. Listen, I was just wondering, I know you have to remember her, Mrs. Golda Meir, when she was Prime Minister of Israel, and everywhere she went, everybody loved her and respected her and treated her like a lady. And I was just wondering, why is it that Mrs. Mandela, you would call her a bag lady?
Well, I call her a bag lady because there were at least $2 million worth of contributions that were made to the Mandela campaign, whatever you want to call it. And the agency, according to one source, the agency that was representing the group is not even registered. And somebody called yesterday, want to know whatever happened to the $2 million.
Yeah, but we don't.
What's that got to do with Golda Meir anyway?
Well, because, a lady...
What has that got to do with Golda Meir?
It has a lot to do with the respect that we pay all kinds of people.
Well, I don't have any respect for Winnie Mandela, so there. On WABC, George, hello.
Hello, Bob. How are you?
What's on your mind, George?
What's on my mind? First of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity because I'm so angry with the current state of affairs in this city that if I don't blow off steam once in a while, it just kind of boils over.
Yeah.
I don't understand, given that we had roughly 2,000 murders last year in this city, and we're on pace this year to break that record.
Right.
I cannot fathom for the life of me how Mario Cuomo can go to sleep at night, having vetoed the death penalty over and over and over again. Murder in this city has become something that now winds up on page 32 of the Daily News in 2 paragraphs. And I'm just very upset by that. We have innocent people getting killed here all the time, and everyone seems to be so complacent about it.
Okay, thank you, George. Appreciate the call.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Hello, Steve. Bob Grant here. Steve is not there. Mike. Let's try Mike here on the New York line. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Bob. I'd like to answer that last caller for a second. Mario Cuomo's a bum, and if you don't like what he does, we just have to not elect him. But we do elect him over and over again, so you got no one to blame but the electorate. Now, my comment, what I really wanted to speak about was, why haven't channels 2, 4, and 7 and CNN and all those stations, how come I haven't seen Nelson Mandela today? Because maybe because the Cubans are out there protesting against him? But I was inundated with them on every channel last week.
Well, that's because he was in New York, and the local channels got permission from the networks. Naturally, the networks were only they were afraid not to give permission to lose all that revenue. Most of that coverage that you saw throughout the day was local,
I got stuck
although
with
a
the
great deal of it was also network, yeah?
I got the Washington coverage too. They cut out programs so we could hear him speak in front of the joint session of the Congress. I'd like to speak in front of them. I have a few things to say to those legislators, but they won't let me. Who am I? I'm only a citizen of this country. The other comment I'd like to make is I live on Staten Island, and I want to comment about Mr. Dinkins. He supported Nelson Mandela, went out with him on a parade, no problem. The next night, he was out with the gays on their parade. But when it came to the dedication of the home port on Staten Island, where was he?
Well,
He never showed up, the bum.
well, he didn't show up. It might have been hypocritical for him to do so. As you know, he's been opposed to the home port. Although, as the mayor, I think he should make an appearance.
And he is the mayor now.
As
That's
a
my point.
symbolic appearance. He is the mayor. That's true.
And all those 6,000 jobs that are going to come, I mean, he may not like it, but they're going to come. And he's going to enjoy the tax revenue. I don't think he's going to say to them, oh, you people don't have to pay taxes.
Well,
He's
of course
going to
not.
take the money. He's going to take every nickel of it. But the only thing he can send us out here on Staten Island is his garbage. And I'm a little tired of it.
Well, that's been going on even before Dinkins.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Yeah. Okay.
Time for secession.
Uh,
Move to Jersey with you and we get rid of Florio.
Well, if you, geographically, Staten Island does not really look as though it belongs to the state of New York, but looks as though it was an entity that should have belonged to the state of New Jersey.
Do you know how New York got it?
I beg your pardon?
Do you know how New York got Staten Island?
Oh, it was a very series of flukes.
It was a tugboat race.
Yeah.
What luck, huh?
Crazy, huh? Thank you.
We didn't roll fast enough.
Well, thank you for the call.
So long, Bob.
David, you're on WABC. Hello.
Yes, hello. In reference to the heat on the president for tax increase,
Yes, sir.
well, Michael Dukakis had this to say. He said, well, I said the truth, and I paid the price. Mr. Bush didn't. That's why we're paying the price. Do you really think that this issue was a key issue to persuade the voters?
No, it wasn't, but that's a contradiction that Dukakis made. You know, first he says, I told the truth and I paid the price, meaning that he was rejected because he told the truth. The president didn't, and now we're all going to pay the price. Now, which is it? Does it mean... See, paying the price indicates a negative response, correct? Well, he's saying that he's negative to what he believed in anyway. It's double talk. Yeah, well, I'll tell you this, though. They went around saying they lost because of Willie Horton. Now it turns out they didn't lose because of Willie Horton. They lost because of the tax issue. In a few months, it'll be something else. The fact is they lost in a big landslide for a whole host of reasons, most of all being the people looked at Dukakis, they looked at George Bush, and they said, between the two, we'll take George. Dukakis just didn't impress anybody, and the more he campaigned and exposed himself, the more people became convinced of that. I thank you for the call.
Thank you.
It's Ken checking in now. Hello, Ken.
Yes, hello, Bob. I wanted to make a suggestion. You had mentioned Thomas Sowell, Alden Keyes, and one other gentleman.
Dr. Walter Williams.
Yes, I wanted to suggest perhaps if you could invite one of these gentlemen on your program, along with a black leader embracing opposite viewpoints.
Well, that would be great, but we can't. People think, oh, it's easy. They could just pick up the telephone, call this guy, call that guy. Do you know how long we've been trying to do just that?
Uh-huh.
I would say, without exaggeration, a couple of years, Roy, right? We finally got Dr. Thomas Sowell. Finally got him. Nobody wanted to come on with him.
Yeah, well, see, that is unfortunate. I guess the reason why I suggested such a thing.
I would love it. It would be a great stimulus to the program.
Because, see, what I find is that you have those who basically feed information or misinformation to the masses of people, and usually they have their own separate forums, whether it's radio talk shows or whatever. But if you have them both together on a panel and just exchanging or discussing or arguing or debating what their viewpoints are, I think there you will have inconsistencies and double standards and flawed positions exposed.
Well, you don't have to sell me on the desirability. Would you like to be an ex officio assistant producer? We'll assign you to trying to establish that. Thank you. Everybody thinks it's so easy. Hey, how come you don't have this guy? Hey, why did you have Gorbachev and Bush? You know what would be good if you had the Pope and the Swami of Upper Kashmiri province, the potentate of Pastafazul, on the air. Or how about a larynxologist? We may do a larynxology program in the not-too-distant future. Of course, the crew in the control room is so busy involved in a conversation they didn't hear that, but that's okay. We're not doing it for the guys in the control room. We're doing it for you.
That was the one thing that he was not.
Yeah, that's one thing he's not.
I almost fainted when I heard you say that. I must take exception. I think he's very much a coward. He's a bully, and bullies are usually exactly what they are. Bullies are cowards. And he's a darling of the left wing.
Well, he is a darling of the left wing. Listen, this is not an endorsement of the man. I hold him in complete contempt. Don't misunderstand me.
Yeah, I know, but I remember him with Tawana Brawley, my daughter. Remember that little episode? And how he shows up here at Mandela's parties. And
oh, well, that doesn't mean he's a coward. What that means is he is a sleazy, tawdry panderer.
Well, isn't that the same thing?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I almost fainted, and I had to call you and tell you that.
Well, I objected to Pierre Renfray's characterizing him that way about the Korean War. I thought that was absurd. Renfray doesn't need to do that to campaign.
Okay, well, I understand. At least you're fair.
I beg your pardon?
I said, at least you're fair.
Well, I try to be, but I'm not fair for fairness' sake. If it comes out fair, good.
Well, I still think he's a coward, but I'll let you go.
I still despise him, so don't get worried.
So do we here. Okay.
Bye-bye. Jeff, you're on WABC. All right, we got it. We haven't had one of those in a long time. Let's try Don. Hello, Don. Don, are you there? Don's not there. All right, let's try Catherine. Are you, who do we have here on line 3?
Herb.
Ted, hello.
Hello, Bob?
Yes.
Bob, I'm calling you up regarding Mr. Mandela and Mrs. Mandela. But first, let's take Winnie Mandela, one of the saints. Winnie Mandela, as you know, had a bodyguard, Jerry Richardson, murdered a 14-year-old colored boy, black boy, because he was against anti-apartheid. But you notice nobody, it's like Yusuf Hawkins being murdered, but nobody here in New York ever criticized the fact that she did it. They made her into a saint. Now let's take the big boy himself. Since his release from prison, Bob, you know, over 3,000 blacks have died in a black-on-black violence in Natal province.
But you see, it doesn't count. If a black dies because another black kills him, it doesn't count. It only counts if a white killed him.
All right, I agree with you. But I want to just bring out a little 201 I did on him.
I mean, that's their mentality. That's not my mentality. That's their mentality.
I agree with you 100%, Bob. But here's the thing I want to bring out. Mandela, you know, who's ANC, which is a Marxist-style liberation group, is with Yasser Arafat, Gaddafi, and also Cuba.
And let's be heard, round 2 of our get-together on WABC. Isn't it interesting that Governor Sleazebag Florio has rammed through, with the aid of the Democratic skunks who are going to really get defeated at the polls next year, the biggest tax hike in the history of New Jersey. Saul Kuberman, outgoing education director for the state of New Jersey, says the $1.1 billion that Florio is fleecing from the voters, from the taxpayers, isn't even earmarked. He's not quite sure how that money is going to be spent. If there was ever a time there should be massive reaction to the voters, to the political situations in the state of New Jersey next year, to send a message. And this is not to say that Republicans walk around with halos, but to send a message to punish the Democrats. Wouldn't it be wonderful if they all would lose in their assembly re-election campaign? There's some people who say they will. It is absolutely astounding, the tax increases that Florio has rammed through. And isn't it interesting that Il Supremo calls Florio the greatest governor in the country? Well, Cuomo doesn't really believe that because Cuomo thinks he's the greatest governor in the country. But that's an old trick. Someone who wants everybody to say he's the greatest calls somebody else the greatest so that they'll say, well, no, you are. And then he goes, oh, shucks. A pox on both their houses. Max, hello.
Bob, you're the greatest. I want to talk about the Mandela situation, but from a different perspective. My idea here is how utterly easy it is to manipulate societies. And if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, a fellow called up and he got Mondello and Mandela mixed up. I forgot which way it was. You corrected him. He called Mandela or Mondello or Yeah. Anyway, I was intrigued by that, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And what I came up with is this. Imagine this scenario. Here we have this Mandela, who is the greatest thing since Thomas Jefferson. I think if Jefferson himself came back, he couldn't have been feted more. And on the other hand, we have a fellow named Keith Mondello, almost the same name, and he is perceived as the very lowest, the scum of our society, something that we're all supposed to be ashamed of. Now, just imagine this, and I'm asking this to all your thoughtful listeners. Imagine that a few different media buttons had been pushed in this thing. Both people were exactly the same, but the trendsetters had pushed a few different buttons. And Mandela, instead of getting a parade and a presidential reception, a couple of editorials, key editorials, said, this guy's a terrorist. His wife was directly responsible for the death of this Stumpy, this young teenager. They advocate necklaces, the most horrendous death. Now imagine this, and Mandela, instead of coming here, had gone down to obscurity. And then imagine, on the other hand, that the same buttons had been pushed in favor of Keith Mondello. He serves a sentence, and when he gets out, instead of being perceived as scum, he is perceived as a folk hero. Not an international hero like Mandela, of course, but he's a hero. He was sent to jail for, not because the law required it, but because some racist rabble-rouser said, if he isn't sent to jail, we're going to burn this town down. So he is perceived as a martyr. Is this as outlandish as I think some people are going to take it?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all.
I think it's perfectly plausible, and I think that this is something that a lot of people, when they say it can't happen here, that they ought to take good heed of this.
Well, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. It's all part. I hate to use the word, and I've used it before. David Dinkins misapplied it, but it's all part of a mosaic. It's all part of the picture that, unfortunately, I see all too clearly, which spells out our doom, our nation as we know it.
Yeah. And, Bob, I'm not making any judgments. I'm not either defending Mondello or putting down Mandel. All I'm doing, because I think you and your listeners have done this far better than I, all I'm trying to do is to show how easily it could have gone exactly 180 degrees the other way. That's all.
Well, you said one thing that is very, very important, and that is you use the word manipulate, and it is easy to manipulate people.
Exactly.
Max, I appreciate your call, and every now and then it gives me some sort of solace to know that there are some people out there like you, Max.
Okay, Bob. Thanks a lot.
Frank.
Bob, I don't think for a second that the people are that foolish that you can push buttons and program that to believe lies and distortion. We saw that happen after 45 years in Eastern Europe, where people, even though they were fed the government line, knew it was a lie and revolted. And we will see eventually the same thing in this country. You know, Bob, despite what they may tell us, and isn't it, we talk about hypocrisy, Nelson Mandela takes the support of the worst terrorist, hoodlum scum on the face of the earth. Gaddafi, Castro, Arafat, and the liberal scum, the hypocrites out there, turn around and say, well, he was in jail for 27 years, and they'll find every excuse imaginable. Remember, the great Francisco Franco of Spain to defeat the Stalinist hoodlums, took help from the greatest statesman in history, the great El Duce Benito Mussolini. Yet Franco, for 40 years, was excoriated by these same liberal hypocrites. You know, if Mandela thinks that Castro is this great humanitarian who wants to help him, why doesn't he go down to Miami Beach and tell those Cuban refugees down there who every day swim from the Caribbean to this nation, risking their lives for American freedom? Let him and his followers tell those people down there what a great man Castro is, and we would see the reaction down there. You know, Bob Grant, I couldn't believe that King David tells New York that he doesn't have a pot, and he somehow winds up with $2 million to have a ticker tape parade down Broadway. What a disgusting and vile, loathsome hypocrite. And you know, Bob, I think that those idiots out there who are supporting Mandela by clapping on Ted Koppel's show, those ANC stooges, you know, Bob, the difference between them and people who support Israel is that any time there's been a war in Israel, Jewish people from teenagers to grandmothers have gone over there to help. But you know, Bob, they'd never go over there to join what they call the struggle. No, it's too easy to sit back over here and just shoot off your mouth. Thank you.
Frank, I thought for sure you were going to mention Jonas Savimbi.
Well, you know, Bob, thank you for reminding me that. Yes, Jonas Savimbi, a magnificent and heroic freedom fighter, a true liberator of the African people, was never given a ticker tape parade. This man has been closed from the media. Could it be because the great Dr. Savimbi is anti-communist? Could it be that whenever you have a true leader who is anti-communist in the third world, the media always turns around and ignores him?
But you see, Frank, this guy Mandela, he is going to tell our president to stop supporting Savimbi. Did you know that?
No, I didn't, Bob. I'm outraged by that.
Well, that's why I thought you were going to mention Savimbi, because it was mentioned that a few of the things that Mandela wants to tell our president, one of them is stop supporting Jonas Savimbi.
Well, perhaps he'd like to see the type of government in South Africa set up that you have in Angola. An MPLA left-wing dictatorship, which did, by the way, agree in 1975 for free elections in Angola. And upon seeing that the great Dr. Savimbi's group, UNITA, was going to be triumphant and reflect the true will of the people, they immediately installed a dictatorship. You know, Bob, in Rhodesia, do you remember Bishop Abel Mozarewa? He was elected unanimously in a UN-supervised election, but because he was not a leftist, the election results were thrown in, and now you have the one-party Leninist dictatorship. But I wouldn't sell those Afrikaner folks short in South Africa. They have a very long history. They're in Africa longer than Jesse and his friends have been here in America. They are true Africans. And, Bob, why is it that those who constantly talk about majority rule in South Africa are against majority rule in America? We're always told that the majority in America must respect, that's one of the code words, the minority. I can't believe their hypocrisy.
Well, you called it, Frank. You called it, and we'll keep up the pressure. Thank you very much.
You.
And let's say hello to Richie. Hello, Richie. You're on WABC with Bob Grant.
Yeah, I think the period just prior to World War II in the 1920s, 1930s is very instructive with regard to America today. People keep looking back, and they look back at that period, and they say, what were the British thinking about when Hitler was doing this? Why did they let Hitler go so far? People also say that, what were the German people thinking about? How could they do that and let this psychopath run their nation? Well, people got to start looking now and say, how could Americans do this, knowing the history that has happened before?
Thank you very much.
Hi, Bob. Listen, I'm a big fan of Bob Grant. I've heard him on the radio, seen him on TV, but I would love to walk into Walden's Books, find your face on the cover of their best-selling book. When are you going to do it?
When I stop being so lazy.
I can't. It would be a bestseller. I know it would. Be fantastic. Have you started on a chapter or a table of contents?
I did 2 chapters and I got bored. I wrote 2 chapters and I got bored.
Well, gee, I bet you're a good writer.
Well, this has nothing to do with it. I think I am a good writer. I just got bored.
Yeah. It takes a lot of time. I remember in college writing a thesis and dissertation. It's one of the most boring things in the world to sit in a room with a typewriter.
Well, what's boring is I got bored with myself.
Well,
But I appreciate the call. I thank you very much, John.
Okay,
Who
listen,
knows?
Bob, one more thing. If you're looking for a good place to live, try New Zealand. Been there twice. Gorgeous country, beautiful people. Just a thought.
Why'd you come back if it's so nice?
No, this was just a visit.
Okay.
Vacation.
All right, if you recommend it to me, what about recommending it to yourself?
Good idea. I think I might...